What's good, y'all? My name is Zach Young, and welcome back to Young Money Sports. And of course, we got another episode of Was He Any Good? I know that today's episode has been one that y'all have wanted for a while, so consider this a momentary going away present from me to you. But without further ado, let's get into it. Michael Jordan. In my opinion, the greatest player in NBA history. His work ethic and championship drive were unmatched, which brought many individual and team accolades throughout his entire career. Now, I'm not going to do the whole song and dance about his whole career like I normally do, because there are hundreds, if not thousands of videos and articles going into great detail about Jordan's greatness. The most notable, of course, being ESPN's 2020 miniseries, The Last Dance. Now, I'd recommend that to any sports fan out there, even if you are familiar with Jordan's career. That goes more in depth than I or any other regular guy ever could, which is why it was acclaimed by critics and sports fans alike. But The Last Dance is still a little relevant for this video, at least the end of it is. See, the miniseries is centered around the Chicago Bulls' last championship season, as well as giving insight into Jordan's career leading up to that point. The show ends with the Bulls winning the 1998 NBA championship, and the team reflecting on the finals and the end of the dynasty. The last shot shows where the core players ended up after the 1998 season. And if you didn't know any better, you probably believe that this was the end for Michael Jordan, and his game winner in Game 6 of the 1998 finals was the last shot of his career. Admittedly, that would have been a very poetic way for his career to conclude, but as we know now, this was not the end. But how do we get there? Well, to answer that, we have to go all the way back to 1999. The 1998-99 season was not a traditional one, to say the least. The NBA owners wanted to change the collective bargaining agreement, setting a hard salary cap and placing limits on maximum player salaries. This, understandably, did not set well with the players, who wanted a softer salary cap and a raise for the minimum salaries. This would end up resulting in a lockout, which lasted from July 1st, 1998 to January 20th, 1999. And just a week before the lengthy lockout was set to end, a bombshell dropped that sent shockwaves around the league. Michael Jordan, who was just coming off a season that saw him win his 5th MVP and 6th championship, announced that he was retiring for the second time. There were hints that Jordan wouldn't be coming back following the 1998 season. Many noticed that he wasn't working out or training at all. He was spending a lot of time just relaxing and playing golf. Leading up to his retirement announcement, he called his teammates and told them that he would be playing golf in California from January 18th to the 25th, and they were able to take that hint. I also don't think the direction of the team was one that Jordan could really get behind. Owner Jerry Krause basically forced legendary coach Phil Jackson off the team, stating that it didn't matter if Jackson went 82-0 in 1998. This affected Jordan since at this point in his career, he only wanted to play for Jackson. It was also up in the air if the Bulls were going to bring back Scottie Pippen, since he had made his frustrations known regarding his insanely low contract. The writing was on the wall, and Jordan felt better just going out on top rather than dealing with the uncertainty of the franchise. Once he retired, the Bulls quickly got to work, dealing Scottie Pippen to the Rockets and cutting talented but problematic forward Dennis Rodman, sending them into a funk that they really wouldn't get out of for the next decade. 1999 wouldn't be insanely eventful for Jordan. He would make some media appearances and even showed up to a Bulls practice to cook rookie guard Corey Benjamin, who claimed he could beat MJ in a one-on-one. He could not. There were some unconfirmed rumors that Phil Jackson wanted Jordan to join him on the Lakers after a one-year absence from coaching, but the most that came out of that was Jordan talking to Kobe Bryant about the triangle offense during Lakers camp. The GOAT would get more active around the turn of the millennium. On January 20th of 2000, it was reported that Michael Jordan would be joining the Washington Wizards front office as the president of basketball operations, as well as becoming a minority owner of the team. He actually was trying to buy teams like the Hornets, Grizzlies, Nuggets, and Bucks, but settled with Washington after lengthy discussions with owner Abe Paulin. The decision to become an executive wasn't originally in the cards, but Jordan decided to give it a try after talking with Paulin and minority owner Ted Leonsis. He was given a 5-year deal, and there was reason to believe that Jordan would want to make them championship contenders sooner rather than later. He had complete control of drafting, dealing players, and hiring staff. The construction of the roster fell solely on Jordan, so all praise could go his way if the team thrived, but the criticism could come just as hard if the team failed. Jordan didn't really have a chance to get anything done at the 2000 draft, since the Wizards didn't own their pick. The only pick they had was in the second round, where they picked Louisiana Monroe forward Mike Smith, 35th overall. He only played 1 year in the league, but it really wasn't that big of a deal. Even if the Wizards had a first-round pick in 2000, that draft was pretty awful, with no real franchise-changing players that would have helped build a championship core. The moves made by Washington in the 2000-2001 season mainly revolved around shedding salary, which were surprisingly good moves. He traded Isaac Austin for cap relief, Tracy Murray was sent to Denver for a second-round pick and Popeye Jones, and the next two moves would really help the team get out of the financial gutter. In February of 2001, the Wizards engaged in an 8-player trade with the Dallas Mavericks that revolved around former franchise face Juwan Howard. The Wizards got back some decent role players, headlined by Duke legend Christian Laettner, and $3 million. This freed Washington of Howard's 7-year, $105 million contract that he signed back in 1996, and at the time that he was traded, he still had 2 years and $40 million left. His recent decline had made him almost unmovable, but his improved play in 2001 convinced Dallas that he could help with their championship push. The other good financial move was cutting aging, declining point guard Rod Strickland. Strickland signed a 4-year, $40 million contract before the 1999 season and was set to make $10 million in the 2002 season. He accepted a $2.5 million settlement, saving the team $7.5 million going into the next season. The 2001 Wizards were understandably awful, finishing 19-63 and losing first-year head coach Leonard Hamilton once the season concluded. The only bright spot on the court was second-year guard Richard Hamilton, but there was some optimism heading into the next season. The team had more financial flexibility, and all that losing got the Wizards the first overall pick in the 2001 draft. This could have been the move that righted the ship towards a window of championship contention. Unfortunately, this just poked a hole in an already sinking ship. Washington selected high school phenom Kwame Brown with the top pick, and from the moment his name was called, it would be an uphill battle for Brown. It's been said that Jordan only drafted Brown to use him as leverage in a possible trade with the Bulls for Elton Brand, but that trade got shut down, so the Wizards were just stuck with Kwame. What I don't understand is, why not run this by ownership before picking Brown when you really didn't want it? This was the #1 pick, and you're going to use that as trade fodder? It really didn't help the situation when just 2 picks later, the Grizzlies picked Pau Gasol, a Hall of Fame big who would bring the Grizzlies relevance and win multiple championships with the Lakers. There were many players taken in this draft that would become all-stars and champions, and even more that would become good starters and role players. Washington made some moves in the summer of 2001. They signed swingman Tyronn Lue and traded a 2005 first-round pick for rookie center Brendan Haywood. Nothing that would indicate that this team is ready to take a step towards competing. But they would make one major move before the season started, one that I don't think anyone saw coming. When Michael Jordan retired for the second time in 1999, he said that there was a 99.9% chance that he would not step on an NBA court again. But of course, when he joined the Wizards front office in 2000, the questions about a comeback kept popping up. The response would always be the same, with Jordan consistently putting aside any hopes of an NBA comeback. Even when it was reported that the GOAT was training in the spring of 2001, he stated that it was just to lose the weight that he had gained since retiring. But I think most felt a comeback was inevitable after Jordan started hosting invitation-only camps and hired his old coach Doug Collins to coach the Wizards. All suspicions were confirmed when on September 25, 2001, Michael Jordan announced that he would be returning to the NBA and playing for the Washington Wizards. Many believed that this wouldn't be possible for Washington for financial reasons. I mean, it's Michael Jordan. He ain't gonna play for chump change. But in fact, he did. He wasn't interested in coming back for the money. He was loaded by this point. He wanted to scratch that competitive itch one more time and compete for championships. He put his money where his mouth was, signing a 2-year, $2 million contract, with half of that money going to the victims of the September 11th terrorist attacks. He would have to sell his stake in the Wizards, but he would still have control of the roster. He knew that this would be a process, and that things wouldn't change overnight. Interestingly enough, he said that he wasn't concerned about this possibly ruining his legacy and the storybook ending that he had in Chicago, which is a stark contrast to his current opinion. Jordan's first game for the Wizards was nothing to write home about. That was probably to be expected. Like I said, MJ said that it would take a little bit for him to get back into a good groove. He scored 21 points on 7 for 21 shooting in a 93-91 loss to the Knicks. The most notable thing about this game was a weird Wizard of Oz mashup that TNT showed before tip-off. MJ showed more consistency in November, scoring 36 times and even scoring 44 points in a 9-point loss to the Jazz. And that was a trend during November as well. The Wizards stumbled out of the gate, starting the season 2-9 and looking like they were heading towards another abysmal year. However, the team started to turn it around, winning 24 of 36 and going into the All-Star break with a 26-21 record. Jordan had some notable moments during this stretch. He got a game-winning block in his first game against the Bulls, a game where he also scored his 30,000th points. History repeated itself when he hit a game-winner against the Cavs, and the best of Jordan in Washington definitely occurred in a late December game against his hometown Hornets. See, the previous game, Jordan had one of the worst games of his career, scoring only 6 points in a 27-point loss to the Pacers. This also broke his streak of 866 games scoring double figures, a streak that went all the way back to 1986. I don't know what changed on that flight from Indy to DC, maybe he took something personally, but MJ would go from one of the worst games of his career to one of the best, scoring an insane 51 points at the ripe old age of 38 in a 17-point win over Charlotte. He got his 50-burger without hitting a single three, getting his points by finishing at the rim and hitting numerous mid-range J's. He became the oldest player to score 50 points in a game, and even to this day, he is still the second oldest player, only being passed by Jamal Crawford, because why wouldn't it be Jamal Crawford? He followed that game up with another scoring flurry in a lopsided win over the Nets, scoring 45 points and only hitting one three. It was safe to say that he had found his footing, and the same could be said for the team. Jordan was named to the 2002 NBA All-Star Game as a starter, and that game is probably remembered for one blooper-worthy moment.
Goodness gracious sakes alive.
Washington was quiet at the 0-2 trade deadline. I guess they didn't want to mess with something that was working. But this pleasant season would soon take a turn for the worse. The team sputtered out of the All-Star break, going 1-9 in the next 10 games. The bigger blow would come in late February of 2002. Michael Jordan would be ruled out for 4 to 6 weeks after getting surgery to repair torn cartilage in his right knee. He returned a little under a month since his last game, but was officially ruled out for the year less than 2 weeks later. He finished the year averaging around 22 points in 60 games played. Washington finished the season with a 37-45 record, an 18-game improvement from the previous year. There was a bit of a late season collapse, but I think the Wizards were still in a much better place than they were even 2 years ago. Jordan and the Wizards' first move of the offseason was to trade bench player Courtney Alexander to the Hornets for a first-round pick, giving them now 4 picks in the upcoming draft. Those picks would be used to draft Jared Jeffries, Juan Dixon, Rod Grizzard, and Juan Carlos Navarro, all guys who would be okay at best. And while there weren't any real franchise faces taken later in this draft, there were guys like Tayshaun Prince, Carlos Boozer, and Louis Scola. The Wizards were more aggressive once free agency started, since they had more financial freedom after Jordan's trade and cut of Howard and Strickland. They lured Larry Hughes away from Golden State with a 3-year deal, and they signed that other guy from Jordan's game winner in '98. They got some veteran grit by signing Jordan's old teammate Charles Oakley, but the biggest move came with a trade. In September of 2002, the Wizards acquired two-time All-Star Jerry Stackhouse in exchange for a package centered around young guard Richard Hamilton. I'm sure at the time this looked good, but hindsight is a bitch with this trade. Stackhouse wouldn't do much in DC, and Hamilton would only go on to be a multiple-time All-Star and an integral piece in the Pistons championship team. So yeah, not a great move by Jordan looking back at it. Speaking of Jordan, in November of 2002, he announced that the upcoming season would be his last, for real this time. He stated that he wanted to return to being an executive and owner once the season concluded, and hoped to see the young core that he created become a playoff team without him. The 2003 season would start off slow for both Jordan and the Wizards, and unlike the previous year, Jordan's eventual improved play wouldn't result in wins for the team. At best, they would hover around 500, and even though Jordan was improving as the year went on, there were still multiple games where he didn't look like himself. There were a handful of games where he wouldn't even put up double figures, and others where he would barely reach that mark. There were still some games where he would look like his old self. He scored 40 points 3 times over the course of the 2003 season, his last one coming just days after his 40th birthday. And there were a good number of times where he would pass 30 points, but this mark wasn't being reached as consistently as it was the previous year. He would be named once again to the All-Star game, hitting what should have been the game winner if Jermaine O'Neal didn't foul Kobe. I know, crazy seeing defense actually being played in an All-Star game. The season would be filled with tributes to Jordan by teams across the league. In his final game at the United Center, he got a 4-minute standing ovation and gave a speech to the wild crowd. The strangest one to me was the Miami Heat retiring his number. Like, sure, it's a nice gesture and all, but it's still weird to me to retire the number of a guy who never played for you and cooked you multiple times in the playoffs. MJ's final game came in Philly. He scored 15 points in a blowout loss to the 76ers. The game was so out of hand that he wasn't even going to play in the fourth quarter, but the crowd kept chanting, so Jordan eventually checked back into the game. The final points of his illustrious career came at the free throw line, and he immediately checked out, receiving another standing ovation. Michael Jordan would finish the 2003 season averaging exactly 20 points per game, and he actually played in all 82 games. Washington finished with another 37-45 record, a pretty disappointing finish considering who they brought in during the offseason. MJ expected to return to Washington's front office after the 2003 season ended, but that would not be the case. Jordan was fired in May of that year. He and part owner Ted Leonsis went into a meeting with owner Abe Paulin, expecting to discuss Jordan coming back to the team as an executive, but Paulin cut right to the chase, saying that Jordan would not be welcomed back to the team, and there would be no discussion. The reason for Jordan's firing came down to the lack of team success and infighting within the organization caused by MJ. See, even before MJ joined the team as a player, he would practice with them at times and still talk to them like he would his old teammates. He called out guys like Juwan Howard and Rod Strickland publicly and privately, and he tried to do the same to his teammates when he started playing, which didn't result in anything positive. Not to mention that the players found it pretty awkward to share a locker room with a guy who had complete control of their contracts. The most infamous treatment went in the direction of number 1 pick Kwame Brown. There were multiple instances of Jordan berating Brown, one time even almost bringing him to tears with an expletive-filled tirade. This certainly negatively impacted Brown's confidence and play on the court, since this criticism was coming from a guy that he had idolized, and he never lived up to the potential that so many believed that he had. Jordan would eventually get another shot at ownership and running a team when he bought the Charlotte Bobcats, but the less said about that, the better. So now, to answer the question, Michael Jordan in Washington, was he any good? This is more complicated than you all may think. If we were just talking about him as a player, then it's a definite yes. I mean, the dude was hooping at 40 years old. That's impressive. But he wasn't just a player in Washington. His drafting wasn't great, but his free agent signings and trades weren't awful. The moves to shed salary were actually pretty solid, and the trade to bring in Jerry Stackhouse didn't end up working out, but it didn't cripple the franchise forever. The Wizards also sold out every home game while Jordan was playing. The biggest blemish on his Wizards resume is definitely his drafting and treatment of Kwame Brown. That could be seen as a franchise-crippling move, especially with who was taken after him. But when combining both his efforts as a player and executive, I think the answer to the title question is still yes. But what did you all think of Michael Jordan in Washington? Who would you like to see next on Was He Any Good? Like and subscribe if you enjoyed. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch y'all later.
Jordan with 4 seconds.